Welcome to our Stage 5 live virtual meeting. This will be our last live virtual meeting for PAST. That's Performance Assessment Skills for Teachers. That's the skills workshop that we were in over the summer to help prepare for EdTPA in student teaching. So for many of you, student teaching is right around the corner. It might even be starting next week. I know many of the student teachers here are starting in a week or two, so they have a little bit longer. So today is for Stage 5. So today I really want to send you off with the information you need to know as you're getting into student teaching, launching into EdTPA, making that transition from PAST to EdTPA. So we're going to review commentary writing, understanding rubric level progressions. We're going to talk about Loud Cloud and EdTPA, preparing to meet your cooperating teacher, and the EdTPA checklist. So that's a lot to cover, and we want to get started. So let me go ahead and share my screen with you. Let's first start in our PAST group space here. So for Stage 5, we'll go to Stages, and then it's all the way at the bottom, the last stage. You made it. Click Read More. We have the final voice thread links. We have the modified submissions for Loud Cloud linked here. I'll also show you how to find those from the EdTPA group space. There's a little activity to prepare to meet your cooperating teacher in the forums. That's right up here. And then the last voice thread link. This is our live meeting, which is also being recorded. There's the Stage 5 final completion documentation, and the last step is the PAST workshop quiz at the very bottom. You can get to it by clicking on the word quiz here. Let me give you a brief preview of it. Just looks like this. There's just 6 quick questions, just for our own information. Not necessarily getting scored on that. It just tracks our completion, or your completion of this course workshop. So we'll first want to get to the commentary writing. So let me stop this share and share with you a sample commentary. So this is a Task 3 Literacy Assessment commentary. As you recall, I've been trying to emphasize throughout this whole course workshop how important the commentary pieces are. There's a commentary piece. You can think of it like a digital worksheet at the end of each task in EdTPA. So in Task 1, there's the planning commentary. In Task 2, there's the instructional commentary. In Task 3, there's the assessment commentary. That's what I'm showing you right here. And then in Task 4, there's a commentary piece as well. So I'm showing you this because it really is the most important piece of your EdTPA, and it's where students often have the most challenge. When you're filling out these assessment commentaries, you really have to kind of go back to these answers several times throughout your student teaching to make sure they're as thorough and that you're sounding as much like a pre-service teacher who's ready for the field as possible. You know, think about the conversations that you have with your cooperating teacher and your faculty supervisor, that instructional talk, when you're analyzing your own teaching, when you're thinking about the needs of your students. That's the kind of thing that you're going to put in these commentary pieces. To really show that you are an educated student teacher, try to loop in everything that you've learned throughout your program and really sound like you are ready for your own classroom. So that involves a lot of analysis, a lot of reflection, and a lot of the ability to cater instruction to your classroom students. So when you go through these commentary pieces, you'll find that there's these prompts. Like here's 1A, identify specific learning objectives. And you see that these responses are very lengthy. This is just a sample, but I want to give you this because you see how in the instructions it says no more than 10 single-space pages. You should make sure it's 10 single-space pages. Don't make it any shorter or longer than that. Of course, it is permitted to be shorter, but to get the kind of responses they're looking for, you really have to make it lengthy. You really have to get into some good detail with what your responses are. So try to make it a full 10 single-space pages. Of course, you can't make it any longer, because if it is any longer, when your response gets digitized into their system, it will be cut off. So that would just be awful. So just really make sure you have 10 single-space pages. So you'll find when you type in your response under these prompts that the paper will expand. And make sure you're using those word templates that we have on the Professional Learning Network. Now, when you're typing into these responses, you'll see that there's a bracket at the beginning of each one. That's where you start typing, after the bracket. So your whole response here will be in between brackets, and that's how your response gets digitized. So again, that's a very important component to ensure that you have those brackets at the beginning and the end of each of your responses. So you'll be writing in paragraph format here for most of them, with the exception of these tables or charts. You'll find that when you do these charts, they'll go in like a table. And I did show you a sample of that when we were doing stage 3, learning about task 3. You'll use these charts. And you're also going to use a chart like this when you do task 4, when you're analyzing the assessment for the math portion. So here it gets back to, you're now analyzing the work samples for patterns of learning. And remember, for patterns of learning, we talked about that qualitative analysis and the quantitative analysis. And you're analyzing it for how students are doing in relative to the essential literacy strategy and related skills. Remember, that goes back to task 1. When you're planning your learning segment should all be focused around one essential literacy strategy that helps students with comprehending or composing text, and the requisite skills, such as pulling out the essential, the important details and the non-important details. For example, I know we did main idea with Mrs. Bannon. If you saw that Mrs. Bannon video from stage 2, where we talked about task 2, she was doing main idea with essential details and non-essential details. So the essential literacy strategy is identifying the main idea. The requisite skills are picking out important details and not important details. So definitely read through these. We're not going to go through these all right now, but you see how it gives you a specific piece of instruction. Refer to specific evidence of submitted feedback to support your explanations. So this is where you're referring to evidence in the student completed assessment, those work samples that you have. So here you can see that the student teacher starts out writing, the feedback that was provided on the mid-unit assessments addresses each student's individual needs and strengths relative to the standards measured. Instead of just writing good job, awesome, or just great, I provided tips and tricks to help the students on future assignments. And you know, that's one of the expectations we talked about when you're giving students feedback, to give them something positive, something they can improve, and also a strategy, how they're going to use this skill in the future. But I like how when this teacher candidate was writing this response, they really spelled it out to the scorers. I did a good job of telling students what they did well, what they need to improve on, and a skill that they can use relative to the essential literacy strategy. Do you see how the teacher candidate really identifies well for the score? Look, I'm meeting all of these requirements. That's a really good idea to remind the scorer that you are meeting all of the requirements and show them where each of the requirements are. You never want to assume anything. So don't think, oh, I told the student what she did well. The scorer should see that. No, you really need to tell the scorer, I told the student what they did well. This is how I did it. This is what I did. You see how you can be very direct with these responses and really help the scorer know that you are doing well on this. So, I mean, I won't say this is a perfect example, but it is a very good. The student teacher would definitely pass with this. So let me stop sharing this for a moment. And I want to share with you where you can find this. So let me go back to our group space. And if you go to resources, and this is the example commentary sample. So it's right down here, task 3 assessment commentary sample. So definitely take some time reading through that. Are there any questions about the commentary sample that I showed you, or any of the commentary pieces that you're going to have to do?
So Tracy, my question is, when you stated that we have to submit 10 single space pages, that includes like all the questions that are being asked, or is it
Yes,
just?
that does include the prompts. So
Oh,
unfortunately, it doesn't give you a whole lot of space, but it should give you enough space to do a good chunk, a good paragraph for each response.
okay.
Yep.
Thank you.
Good question. Okay, next I want to show you the Understanding Rubric Level Progressions tools. And you can find these in the group spaces here in EdTPA. And these are going to be in the content-specific materials, because this is going to be a tool that's specific for each content area. So you're going to be looking for elementary. So we'll go into the content-specific materials, click on elementary education, and 2019, 2020. And now I'm going to show you the Understanding Rubric Level Progressions. It's titled URLP. And of course, we're elementary, so this is ELE. Now this document, I will warn you, can be a little overwhelming. But make a note of it, and when you are in the midst of doing your EdTPA, maybe you revisit it. Don't revisit it right at the beginning, because it might be overwhelming to you. But this is the exact same tool that EdTPA gives to the official EdTPA scores when they're evaluating your work. So you know in the handbook how you have all of the rubrics that the scores will use to score your work? This breaks down those rubrics and how to decide what work gets categorized into which rubric level. So this is the one for task 4. So let me just get through right to the heart of it here. Okay. So this is the first one for rubric 1. So we know rubric 1 helps evaluate your performance in task 1, planning. When you're working on the planning portion, one of the things you do is create lesson plans that allow students to build on their understanding of the essential literacy strategy over the course of the 3 to 5 days. Remember how we talked about when you're teaching that content to the students over the 3 days, you should get deeper into students having deeper levels of thinking, going into those deep levels such as noted on Bloom's taxonomy or Norman Webb's depth of knowledge. So when you're helping students get to those deeper levels of thinking related to your essential literacy strategy, you are meeting rubric 1. So if you go into rubric 1, it talks about the concepts of the rubric, the literacy terms that are central to meeting this rubric 1. Make sure you understand what these words are, because these are in the instructions, and you need to make sure that you're meeting these expectations. But then if you go down a little bit further, it tells you what are the scores going to look at when they're scoring you on rubric 1. They're going to look at your context for learning information template. They're going to look at your literacy planning commentary template, and specifically your response to prompt 1. And they're going to look at your strategic review of the lesson plans and instructional materials. So the scorer is going to review your lesson plans and your instructional materials to see if you are adequately doing, let's go back up, if you are adequately building students' understanding of the essential literacy strategy and the skills that support that strategy. So let's go down a little bit further. You do get an automatic 1 if you have content inaccuracies. That means if you're teaching the content incorrectly, or if there's a pattern of misalignment. That means you're not teaching the standards that you have noted on your lesson plans that you are going to teach. Or if you're not teaching the correct subject area. Remember, for elementary, you're supposed to be teaching English language arts for this. Then we get to unpacking the rubric levels. So it tells us exactly what you need to do to get a level 3 on the rubric. And they do say for EdTPA, you should strive to get a level 3. In some areas, you might get above a level 3, but strive at a minimum to meet at least the level 3. So for level 3, plans for instruction are logically sequenced. That means you've supported the students from lesson 1 to lesson 3 or 5, where you're scaffolding to help them learn the content, and you're helping them to get to those deeper levels of thinking. Plans are presented in a sequence which each lesson builds on the previous one. Of course, that will probably be natural to you if you're planning these 3 to 5 lessons all around the same learning segment, because you're going to have to challenge students a bit as you go on teaching the same concept throughout the week. In addition, the sequencing of the plans support learning by connecting the conventions and skills to the essential literacy strategy during the learning segment. These connections are explicitly written in the plans or the commentary, and how the connections are made is not left to the determination of the score. Remember, we talked about when you're writing these commentary pieces to be very explicit about what you're doing and not to leave any guessing to the score. Make sure it's very clear that you're meeting all the expectations. Also at level 3, the candidate will identify a central focus on something related to the comprehension or composition and may be vague about the strategy skills distinction in the commentary. However, to score level 3 in the lessons, they must have the standards and objectives and learning tasks that both support the essential literacy strategy and related skills. That means whatever instructional activities you're doing, they must be directly related to supporting the essential literacy strategy and related skills. I know sometimes with these textbooks that have English language arts, these teacher's guides, they try to infuse so many other concepts into the lesson for the day. You definitely do not want to do that for your EdTPA, because that will show a pattern, that will show misalignment. So if you have to do that at the school you're at, what you're going to do is separate your English language arts lesson into 2 for that day. And for your EdTPA portion, just teach the portion that relates to the essential literacy strategy and related skills. And then later on in the day, you can teach all those extra activities that you need to teach, such as CVC words or syllables or anything like that. Anything that's not related to your essential literacy strategy and related skills, separate that, because that's not going to be relevant for this. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. Tracy, like what you just said, to separate those, how would another student, let's say at another college, know this if they don't do like a PA, the PASS course? Like, how do people figure this out?
You know, other universities have different ways of supporting students. I don't really know exactly what they do, but it is all described in this handbook. So if one was just to really study this handbook and do it on their own, they probably could. It's just that I've been reading through these handbooks for 5 years now, so I have a pretty good understanding of what the expectation is. And they also teach the scorers this a little bit more in depth than the students, unfortunately. Okay. So it really is left up to the universities to make sure the students know what they're supposed to be doing.
Okay, I'm trying.
The state, really the states are supposed to be in charge of disseminating EdTPA information to the individual schools. If you're at Sunnyvale Elementary in Georgia, the state of Georgia Department of Education is supposed to send information to that school and tell them what EdTPA is and what these teacher candidates are going to be doing in their school. So when you have a complex curriculum that includes, many different components, it makes it really complex for these teacher candidates. But yeah, I know it's a lot of information. That's a good question, and that's why I'm showing you this document. It is very overwhelming, but I want you to know about it, because once you get towards the end of your student teaching, and you're going to want to go back and make sure that you're answering everything appropriately in these commentaries, that's when you're going to really go back and check these URLP documents, is when you're doing like a second and third read of your commentary.
Okay, and how can I ensure that the school that I'm going to be doing student teaching in would be able to receive a guideline of what is expected for EdTPA? Because from my experience, a lot of the teachers, they're like, I have no idea what EdTPA is.
Okay, well, that perfectly transitions us to the next thing I wanted to discuss with you, which is preparing to meet your cooperating teacher. So as I just said, most of the schools should be aware of EdTPA and what the requirements are. However, the way that information is disseminated varies, and we don't know exactly how it's done. So we want you to be prepared and you to kind of help your cooperating teacher understand what those requirements are. So one of the things I have listed here in stage 5 is preparing to meet your cooperating teacher. And in the forms, we have a little activity on that. So if you go to the forms here, let's see. So you could either record an audio clip or just practice on your own, take some notes on what you could tell your cooperating teacher or send to your cooperating teacher who's going to be hosting you. If you do have the opportunity to meet them ahead of time, this would be a great conversation to have voice to voice. If you're not going to be able to meet them ahead of your first day, send them an email or a note, because it is important you share this information with them ahead of time. Share with them what EdTPA is. You don't have to go in depth. You just have to say it's a portfolio assessment, and I do have to compile the evidence during student teaching. Passing EdTPA is a requirement for certification in my state. You have to explain the requirements of GCU student teaching, and our requirement is for you to complete your EdTPA during student teaching. You will have a few other additional assignments, but the main component to your student teaching is going to be completing your EdTPA portfolio. We'll talk more about that in just a second. You also want to tell your teacher about any additional roles who will interact with you and the cooperating teacher, and the main role there to share is your faculty supervisor. So I hope you know your faculty supervisor is going to be the GCU faculty member who comes to observe you on 4 different occasions to complete your formal evaluations.
Okay.
And those will be completed digitally, and your supervisor will be able to complete those digitally for you, but then you will upload a copy of that to your online faculty member so that you get the points associated with it.
Okay.
Your overview should also include some of your qualifications, such as your personal strengths, accomplishments, or motivations to be effective in student teaching, and of course, including sincere appreciation for hosting you in the classroom. So our main goal of this is to share that you are going to be doing EdTPA and make sure your teacher is aware of that. You could even say that the EdTPA portfolio does include video recording in the classroom, because they definitely need to know that. That is not an option. You have to do it. So if they have a problem with that, it's best to know early rather than late. But that's maybe a portion you include in this as well. Again, it's best to do it voice to voice, but if you can't do it voice to voice, it is so important to get this information to your cooperating teacher ahead of time. So if your student teaching starts next week and you still haven't met them yet, you might want to just type something up and send it by email. Like I said, most teachers should be aware of EdTPA already, but you don't want to leave anything to chance. So just do your due diligence and make sure that they are aware. And it sounds very professional coming from you as well. It also shows that you're aware and you're prepared for it. Okay, so the next thing I wanted to go over with you is LoudCloud and EdTPA. So just a minute ago, I said when you're in student teaching, your main emphasis is going to be completing EdTPA portfolio. But there also are some assignments in your online course. Now, for every student at GCU, they go through, every College of Ed student who's in an initial program will go through the student teaching with the student teaching course online. Now, that being said, not every student teacher across the country has to do EdTPA. So what GCU has in their program is called STEP. It's also a mini unit where you will analyze your teaching, but the requirements are slightly different than EdTPA. So for that reason, the students who are doing EdTPA will not be doing STEP. So anytime you see STEP in your student teaching course, just think, that's not for me, that's not my assignment. Because what we have for you is modified assignment submissions so that you will be able to work on your EdTPA throughout student teaching and not get confused with the STEP items. So if you go into this EdTPA group space, now we're going to look at this purple circle on the left. This purple circle has the modified student teaching submissions for LoudCloud. And most of you have the 15-week course. If your online student teaching course is 15 weeks, this is the one you will reference. And you'll see a chart here with 2 columns, things I do as an EdTPA teacher candidate, both columns. You'll have assignments and professional portfolio, and then you have EdTPA. So these are 2 completely separate things. EdTPA is the portfolio that you're going to be collecting evidence for your teacher certification. The professional portfolio is just an assignment that you're working on at GCU that you'll be turning into your online course instructor. So if you scroll down, week 1, that's your introduction to student teaching. You'll have a PLN scavenger hunt. Remember, this is an assignment, and then an interview of your cooperating teacher. There are no EdTPA items, no STEP modified assignment submissions this week. Then in week 2, you have your professional portfolio set up. That's just an assignment that you're doing for class. And then for EdTPA, you have to start working on, you submit your documentation of completing past. Those are the emailed copies of the stage completion that you have. And then you have the completed context for learning information template. Remember, that's the template that I said you could get started on now, where it just documents information about your school and class. As long as you know where you're going to be placed, you can start on that now. That's the context for learning information template. I can show you where that is again if you'd like. All the templates are going to be, if you click on groups and EdTPA, if you click on the purple square, this is going to take you to the handbooks and templates. Select elementary education, 2019, 2020. And this is the context for learning information template. Okay? And so the last thing I wanted to show you is the checklist. So remember yesterday in stage 4, we were looking at the handbook, and I was showing you where you can find what to submit, where for each task it's listed A, B, C, D. You can use that as a checklist, but I also want to show you something that we've created to help you keep track of meeting all of the EdTPA requirements. If you go to the general support folder, and then support and guidance, tips and tools, and here it's EdTPA checklist. And what this is it's a tool that you can use while you're completing student teaching to help make sure you're meeting these very important pieces of instructions. Are your templates formatted as word processing files? For example, Microsoft Word, Pages, not PDF. Are you using the correct content-specific templates? Are you using the appropriate lesson plan templates? Do your plans for language development explain how you will support the whole class and groups? So these are just good checks that you can do while you're working on your EdTPA to make sure you're meeting these very important pieces of requirements. And we have it broken down into tasks. So there's task 1, task 2, task 3. Do you remember what I was talking about in the handbooks when I was talking about how you can use that as a checklist under what to submit?
No, can you refresh my memory?
Yeah, let me show you that again.
And would you be able to show me where can I find the list of the vocabulary that you mentioned earlier whenever we do the commentary to include that type of vocabulary in there?
Yes, I'll show you that as well. So you can find both of those things in the handbook. Let me make this a little bit bigger. Okay, you see in the handbook how for each task it has what do I need to think about, what do I need to do, and what do I need to write. So under this overview page, which comes right after structure of the handbook, it tells you what to do, what to submit, and then it gives you a copy of all of the evaluation rubrics that the scores are going to use to evaluate your work for this task. The what to submit column can also be used like a checklist because these are the pieces of evidence you're going to need.
Okay.
Task 1, you need A through E here. Or this is task 4. And then for the glossary, you can find that at the end. All of those terms. These are also the same terms you'll see on the rubrics. So when you're looking at, up here at the rubrics, you'll also see that they use those same words. So when you see one of those words and you think, gosh, I'm not sure exactly what that means, essential literacy strategy, look in the glossary and you'll probably find it's one of the words they have listed there.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm. So this is our final live virtual meeting, but it's not the last of support you'll receive. You, of course, have your peer, a partner, that you can keep in contact with as you're finishing up PASS, but also as you're getting started with student teaching. Maybe you want to share with them the note that you're going to be writing to your cooperating teacher and discuss what exactly you're going to be sharing. And then also, once you get started with the semester, I'll be sending you out emails from time to time, but we have webinars. So we have an EdTPA study group that's an ongoing webinar that's every few weeks throughout the semester. That's hosted by my colleague, Dr. Weinberg, who is also a very trained EdTPA scorer who's very familiar with the expectations. And then various other webinars to help you throughout the semester. So those are, of course, recorded and posted on the PLN as well. Don't forget about your peers and peer partners on the PLN. And you can also, oh, let me show you this other tool. In the EdTPA group space, we have these top 5 items here. One of them is submit an EdTPA related question to the College of Education with an EdTPA inquiry request ticket. So once you start your student teaching, if you feel all by yourself, your peer partner isn't helping you, then submit a question to the College of Education using this ticket. I'll show you what it looks like. Just have to tell us, is this your first EdTPA ticket, your first and last name, your position? Can you see this?
No, I see you.
Okay, this is what the ticket looks like.
Okay, I see it now, yes.
Your position, you would be a teacher candidate, your ID if you're a teacher candidate, phone number, email, and what your question is.
Okay.
So then that allows us to get back to you in a timely manner regarding your EdTPA questions. Because you're a faculty member online, They may or may not have a lot of information about EdTPA. If they do, great. If they don't, we don't want you to feel alone. We are still here to help you here in the College of Education. So you can submit this EdTPA inquiry ticket anytime. You can submit it multiple times throughout the semester. Whenever you feel you need some EdTPA guidance, definitely get in here. But like I said, we're also going to have webinars throughout the semester. We're going to still have our spaces on the PLN. You'll still have access to the past group space, but then you're also going to have that EdTPA group space that you're going to be using primarily. And then you're going to have your online course that's in LoudCloud. But remember, not everyone in your class in LoudCloud is going to be working on EdTPA. There might be students from other states who do not have to do EdTPA, and they'll be working on the STEP. But that shouldn't make you confused at all, because you know you are not doing STEP, you're doing EdTPA. Georgia, New York, and Wisconsin.
Will the instructor during the course for EdTPA also remind us that we don't have to do the STEP?
Your instructor should be aware as well. You just might have to remind them that you are from Georgia, New York, or Wisconsin. Sometimes they have to kind of hunt a little to see where exactly your student teaching is located.
Okay.
So you just might have to remind them of that.
Okay.
Are there any other questions?
What about the field supervisor, the clinical field supervisor? When does that person get in touch with me?
I would say usually 1 to 2 weeks before your student teaching has started.
Okay.
When is your student teaching starting?
I'm supposed to start at September 3rd. I am in New York.
Okay, so if they haven't reached out to you yet, you certainly could reach out to your supervisor if you know their contact information.
Okay.
Otherwise, definitely if you haven't heard from them by 2 weeks prior to the start, you can get in touch with them.
Okay.
All right, well, good luck. Best of luck to you. And like I said, if you think of anything else, don't feel like you're isolated. EdTPA is a big undertaking, but we are definitely here to support you.
Thank you. Tracy, I have one more question.
Sure.
I know that after each past course, we've had to take a quiz. So now I know I have to save them, and then I just submit them to LoudCloud. Is that the way it's done?
Yes, once you get into your student teaching course, you'll be submitting them in LoudCloud there.
Okay, then. All right. Thank you.
Thank you. Have a good day.
Thank you, you too. Bye.
Bye.